Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to read you a very interesting story about Marjorie Taylor Greene and what she's planning to propose, and I'm going to give you my political analysis for what it's worth, since this is what my channel is about. You might not enjoy it that much, you might enjoy it, or you might appreciate the fact that I'm being extremely realistic and explaining why it might not work, or very likely won't work. But before I do, I want to introduce all my viewers, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, to a channel called Police Activity. It's 2.83 million subscribers, and it's something that I think all of America should watch or subscribe to. And it shows you what law enforcement officials have to go through every single day, how they risk their lives, how they help people in need. And here's an example: Georgia officer saves choking baby. Viewed over 21 million times. And it was a really beautiful moment. Very, frightening and, stressful moment where a poor little baby was either choking on something or had something lodged in her throat, and the officer saved her life before paramedics came. And it was really beautiful. And it was a harrowing experience, obviously, for any mom or grandmother. So there were people of color who called, and I believe it was a white officer, but not exactly sure. But it was a beautiful moment that people should really watch. I'll put the link below. Marjorie Taylor Greene proposes expelling Maxine Waters, adopting Democratic tactic used against her, by Emily Brooks. This is really interesting. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said she will reveal a resolution to expel Maxine Waters from the House over her comments encouraging protesters in Minnesota to get confrontational. In doing so, the firebrand Georgia Republican Congresswoman is taking a tactic that some House Democrats employed against her earlier this year and turning it back on them. Greene's grounds for expelling Waters, a California Democrat, are that she traveled to Minnesota and joined in protests over the trial of Chauvin, who is charged in the death. If there is a not guilty, we've got to get more confrontational, eventually Waters said, after traveling across state lines to incite. So Greene said in a statement, you can read the article, it's a Washington Examiner article. As a sitting United States Congresswoman, Representative Maxine Waters demanded a guilty verdict, and she goes on to explain how her words could have resulted in tragedy. Greene may have gotten the idea of an expulsion resolution because Democrats tried to do the same thing to her. Democratic Representative Jimmy Gomez in January revealed a resolution to expel Greene from her committee assignments because of her past incendiary comments. Another 71 Democrats joined Gomez in co-sponsoring the resolution, including Waters. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, though, shut down the effort to expel Greene from Congress, instead stopping at Democrats removing Greene from her committee assignments after the Republican conference refused to do so alone. Greene might find some form of support from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. On Sunday, McCarthy tweeted that if Pelosi did not take action against Waters so Maxine Waters is inciting. Kevin McCarthy said so if Speaker Pelosi doesn't act against this dangerous rhetoric, I will bring action this week. I don't think Kevin McCarthy, I could be wrong, I don't think Kevin McCarthy will back Marjorie Taylor Greene. And here are my thoughts. So hit subscribe to this channel. There are people who are saying, I'm unsubbing to you. It's like, I don't exactly know why, but I think I'm giving a rational and nuanced and reasonable take on very contentious issues, and not doing so just to be reasonable. I think they're the most logical and rational vantage points. I support law enforcement. Like I said, please subscribe to Police Activity. If you're watching this and you have the MSNBC, CNN, left-leaning view of police officers or law enforcement, watch Police Activity. Like, all the the different segments, you'll see what law enforcement goes through. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement throughout the country because they do risk their lives. I'll be doing more videos on Darian Jarrett. That is a story. This poor man, this officer, noble, heroic man, lost his life. He had 3 children, 1 on the way, and a fiancée. And his life was taken from him. And Biden's Homeland Security investigation Biden's Homeland Security should have notified him not to stop a certain very armed and dangerous criminal. And so I talked about what his attorney stated, and I gave the Albuquerque Journal article, but that was in a couple segments ago. But my take on the George Floyd and Chauvin situation is that I support law enforcement, but what happened with George Floyd, the fact that I'm trying to explain to people, and people say, oh, I'm unsubbing. It's like, well, you can disagree. If you want to unsub, you'll probably be back. Maybe you won't, but it's all good either way. I do believe that George Floyd, I believe that he was murdered because he was saying, I can't breathe so many times. And Eric Garner, I believe the same thing happened to him in New York. There's so the fact that he had narcotics in his system is not relevant to me in that situation. That has nothing to do with my other vantage point, which is I'm very strong and passionate about supporting law enforcement, because I know the vast majority of interactions between law enforcement are an officer saving a baby, or an officer protecting your life, or protecting you from an armed robbery, or from crime, or from an assault, So I can have both vantage points, and I've explained my vantage point regarding Chauvin. But so anyway, I'll get back to Marjorie Taylor Greene right now. She does not have the political clout. So Greene also asserted on Sunday that continual incitement by Waters makes her, a danger. Okay, so Waters, an 82-year-old Congresswoman who joined the House in 1991, has long been known for her incendiary statements. She's had a history of making very controversial statements, and the hypocrisy is unbelievable. You can't, ladies and gentlemen, I guess this is what I'm trying to, it's so difficult to give my vantage point when so many people who watch are firmly within, or I should say, do you remember when I told you, ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago? See, a lot of the times, I'm not right about everything, but about big things, I'm usually right about. And I said I was right. Clinton lost. I said, don't ever look at message boards. Take message boards seriously. They're a hoax, and it can only lead to a dangerous outcome. Marjorie Taylor Greene, because of whatever kind of momentary infatuation she had with message boards or any type of social media nonsense, she's essentially lost political clout. You have Republicans, you have never-Trumpers who would never side with her anyway. Then you have people like Rand Paul, people like Mitch McConnell, people like Jim Jordan, who might not want to side with her because of her past with social media. I said, get off of Twitter, get off of Facebook, and never listen to any absurd message boards. You could see my debates on hagoodman.com, and you could read my writing. One of the debates is with somebody that helped foment the absurd message board nonsense. Because of that, Marjorie Taylor Greene has no chance to expel Maxine Waters. B, you're not going to get 70 Republicans the way Democrats got 70 Democrats to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee assignments. Republicans don't roll that way any longer. That's not the way the Republican Party. That's not what the Republicans do. What the Republicans do is the Republicans act in the following manner. You have a group of never Trumpers who actually vote alongside Trump over 90% of the time. Over 90% of the time, and they then pretend that they don't like Trump's personality and they do nothing to oppose our beloved President Biden. But they're the good moral Republicans. Then you have a Republican Congress. Democratic-run House, Democratic Senate, slimmest majority in one of the tiniest majorities in history. Republicans will in 2022 take over the House. It'll be a whole new ballgame. But until then, because you need Trump Republicans to take over the House, who will be against counterinsurgency conflicts and endless wars and quagmires, and will abide or pass legislation that is more alongside what President Trump would. President Trump passed prison reform legislation. There won't be the traditional Republican George W. Bush Republican Party that ran the country into the ground. But until then, you don't have media, you don't have most publications in the country, you don't have any media support, you don't have any political backing within your own political party. Republicans have no political backing even within their own political party to get anything done to counter the hypocrisy of Democrats. So Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Waters, is going to just simply be able to say anything. Nancy Pelosi will defend her immediately, just like another Congresswoman stated something really horrendous and anti-Semitic. And instead of condemning that specific statement, Democrats did, we don't like all bad things we condemn. And that's how they roll. It's all public relations. And they have everybody from Jimmy Kimmel to Seth Meyers to Stephen Colbert, all of late night, all of Hollywood, all of social media algorithms. Their entire political party generally stands and is unified. You don't have Republicans even supporting. You don't have all Republicans even supporting President Trump when he needed them to support him. So I don't think this is going to take place. I think that if it was Rand Paul, or I think if Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, didn't have that history with an absurd message board I told people not to even touch with a 10-foot pole, it would maybe be a different story, or at least she could have the resolution gain some traction within the Republican Party. But you're going to need somebody like Rand Paul or Jim Jordan or somebody like Kevin McCarthy. If Kevin McCarthy introduces this resolution, you're still not going to, because it's the Democrats run the House, you're not going to expel Congresswoman Waters, but you'll at least give them a taste of their own medicine in terms of blaming Trump for every word he says. So there was $1 to $2 billion in property damage, and left-leaning advocates are, some online are actually saying, or I should say messages online from left-leaning, observers are saying, oh, well, look, we forced this outcome to take place. That is probably the most immoral vantage point, especially when you consider 19 lives lost, most of the lives lost being people of color, $1 to $2 billion in property damage in cities where people of color live and people of color owned businesses. So, and you have also the fact that it was an election year where Democrats and media turned the other way. When our beloved President Biden, if our beloved President Biden was presiding over that type of scenario, I think media coverage would be a bit different. Anyway, the point is there's tremendous hypocrisy. They never correlate the words on the left to $1 to $2 billion in property damage and 19 lives lost. But they definitely correlate Trump's words to January 6th. The hypocrisy is unbelievable. But see, that's the thing. It's the left and the right, or Republicans and Democrats, but Democrats more so, especially with their stranglehold on media. Democrats are running a racket. So when they say, well, this wasn't justice, what they're saying is, my God, we've got exactly what we feel is justified, but we can't possibly give up the moral high ground. So we have to continually pretend we're morally superior, while at the same time doing nothing in terms of legislation to prevent, that type of thing from taking place again. So it's the same thing, AOC and Medicare for All. How she was elected to pass Medicare for All, or to push a vote for it. And Green New Deal legislation, she helped write it. You'll never see her vote on it as legislation. Why? Because it's a gigantic racket. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. My usual long-winded self. Give me your thoughts. Thank you so very much. Hit subscribe to this channel. I'll be doing another live stream, ladies and gentlemen. Probably either Thursday or Friday. Thank you so much.